Welcome to Meet the Press Now. I'm Kristen Welker in Washington, where President Trump is testing the limits of his national security agenda here at home and abroad, as he increasingly relies on the U.S. military to address issues from the flow of illicit drugs to domestic law enforcement. Right now, President Trump is hosting a roundtable discussion at the White House to tout the administration's efforts to crack down on drug cartels and human trafficking operations. President Trump is also using the event to malign his predecessor, baselessly claiming that cartels took over the country. Listen.
We inherited from this past administration, it's like disgraceful. In a matter of weeks, the task force has made the largest number of arrests of cartel leaders, operatives, and gang members in American history, more than 3,000 and counting. The last administration allowed the cartels and their operatives to frankly take over our country, to freely infiltrate America and all the communities nationwide. Along with transnational gangs, these groups have unleashed more bloodshed and killing on American soil than all other terrorist groups combined. These are the worst of the worst. It should now be clear to the entire world that the cartels are the ISIS of the Western Hemisphere.
Now, it comes as the U.S. military strikes against alleged drug smuggling boats in South America appears to be expanding. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth posting on social media yesterday, the Pentagon carried out 2 strikes on what he called narco-terrorists, this time in the Eastern Pacific. It brings the total number of strikes up to 9, with at least 37 reported deaths. Today, while to reporters in the Oval Office, President Trump warned he's prepared to escalate U.S. military strikes on the cartels.
There are very few boats traveling on the water right now. Actually, that includes fishing boats. That includes any other kind of boat. But there are very few boats traveling on the water. So now they'll come in by land to a lesser extent, and they will be hit on land also. We will hit them very hard when they come in by land. And they haven't experienced that yet, but now we're totally prepared to do that.
Meanwhile, here at home, officials in San Francisco were bracing for the potential deployment of federal agents to their city, sparking protests in nearby Alameda. But in a statement this afternoon, San Francisco Mayor Daniel Lurie said the president called off that federal deployment, writing, quote, "The president told me clearly that he was calling off any plans for a federal deployment in San Francisco." Secretary of Homeland Security Kristi Noem reaffirmed that direction in our conversation this morning. President Trump is answering questions right now at the White House. We do want to listen in.
Right now, and that's a big difference from what it was 2 years ago when everybody was pouring in. But we're very unhappy with Venezuela because of what they've done. They've emptied their prisons into our country. Nobody can do that. Only a stupid person would have accepted it, and that's what we had running our country, very stupid people. So we're not happy with Venezuela, I will tell you. Yeah.
Mr. President. Thank you, President Trump.
Yeah, you okay?
Yes. On fentanyl.
We're going to lose
Sorry
you.
about that. On fentanyl,
we have
President
some
Trump.
good medical help right over. That's all right.
On fentanyl, according to CDC data, nearly 330,000 Americans died over the past 5 years from fentanyl. That's 1 in every 1,000 Americans who died.
It's more than that, but that's all right.
Yes,
it's
I know
more.
you think it's even more.
I'll be discussing that with President
Yes,
Xi.
so that's actually my question.
I figured it was.
I was wondering, since it mostly comes from China and has caused such carnage in the U.S., what are you going to say to convey the seriousness? And also a second question for you or Secretary Hegseth. Is there any evidence that China is now smuggling fentanyl through Venezuela to bypass U.S. and Mexican port controls? They
are doing that, yes. But they are paying right now a 20% tariff because of fentanyl. That's billions and billions of dollars that they're paying. We're actually, on November 1st, the tariff on China goes to 157%, which is record-setting territory. And we don't want that because it's not sustainable for them. They can't sustain that. We don't want them to have to go through that. So I'm meeting with President Xi, and I would say we have some big issues, like with the farmers and various other things. But the first question I'm going to be asking him about is fentanyl. And if you think about it, they make $100 million. Think of this. They make $100 million selling fentanyl into our country, $100 million. They lose $100 billion with the 20% tariff. So it's not a good business proposition. It's $100 billion approximately that they have to pay. That's a big penalty to make 100 million. So I think they want to do something. They want to put it on the list. It's on the list. It's one of the things we're talking about, and I'm putting it right at the front of the list. So they pay a very big penalty for doing that, and I don't think they want to be doing it. And we'll see what happens at the end of next week, because I'll be meeting next week, as you know, along with we're stopping in Malaysia, we're stopping in South Korea, we're stopping in Japan. I'm meeting with President Xi actually in South Korea. So it'll be the first thing on the list. Yeah, please.
Yes, Mr. President, on the drug boats, sir, has there been any discussion about capturing one so that you can show the amount of narcotics?
We know everything about them. Yeah, Jennifer. We know everything about them. We know where they're coming from, who they're coming with, generally who's in the boat. I'll let Pete discuss it a little bit, but they have incredible intelligence. And, you know, usually when you see 5 engines, I've never even seen that before, but when you see 5 engines on a boat going about 65 miles an hour, loaded up with white powder in silver cases, generally speaking, that's not a good sign. They're not going fishing, right? And you don't see any fishing rods, right? So, Pete, I'll let you discuss that a little bit, please.
Well, yes, sir. Likewise, generally you don't see fishing in submarines either, sir. So the U.S. military, as I mentioned, nobody better in the world at mapping networks, identifying who's connected to who inside terrorist organizations. It's just the media is used to hearing that when it pertains to Afghanistan and Iraq and ISIS and al-Qaeda. But if you reframe how you understand the world in our own hemisphere, that's exactly what these foreign terrorist organizations are. And so we will track them, we will map them, we will network them, and we will hunt them and kill them because they're trying to and they are killing and poisoning the American people. And inside that, we have all the license necessary, all the authorities necessary to take these kinetic strikes, and we'll continue to take them.
And we've been, you know, just to add, because I think it's important, we've been capturing them for years. You know, it's not like, gee, let's capture one. We've been doing that for years. For 25 years, we've been doing it. Not at a level like we're doing it now. I mean, just with the hits we're hitting, but we have much more intensity than any administration's ever had. But we've been capturing these boats for years, and they get back into the system, and they do it again and again and again, and they don't fear that. They have no fear. The thing I can tell you right now, it's very hard to find any floating vessel right now on the Pacific or in the Gulf, and I would like to call it by its official name, the Gulf of America. Another little triumph of the Trump administration. I said for years, I said, why do we call it the Gulf of Mexico? It's 93%. The shoreline is 93% ours. I never understood that, so I made that change. I never realized how easy that was going to be, other than, I guess, AP fought us in court, and the judge said, but that's the name. And actually, they were sort of semi-prohibited from even covering us after that. It was pretty amazing. But we have the Gulf of America, and there are very few boats, very, very few boats, not even fishing boats, to be honest. I don't want to do that to the fishing industry, but it's been so effective. And our sea drugs, as they call them, they use the term sea drugs, the drugs coming in by sea, are like 5% of what they were a year ago, less than 5%. So now they're coming in by land, and even the land is concerned, because I told them that's going to be next. You know, the land is going to be next, and we may go to the Senate, we may go to the, you know, Congress and tell them about it, but I can't imagine they'd have any problem with it. I think, in fact, while we're here, I think it's a good idea, Pete. You go to Congress, you tell them about it. What are they going to do? Say, gee, we don't want to stop drugs pouring in. They're killing 300,000 people a year. I think that's the real number, 300,000 people a year. So between that and my discussion with President Xi, I think we have never made progress like we've made. The sea drugs are almost dead, and they can't come in that fast from the land. And the land drugs are much more dangerous for them. It's going to be much more dangerous. You'll be seeing that soon. So that's the way it is. Yeah. Go ahead, please. Yeah, go ahead, please. With the glasses, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Good.
I wanted to ask, what's your reaction to Representative Dan Goldman calling on NYPD to arrest ICE agents who he says are acting illegally? He says they are illegally assaulting people and illegally detaining people at immigration courts in New York.
Well, you know, I know Dan, and Dan's a loser. You understand. He's a guy that doesn't have what it takes. He's been trying so hard, and they're exhausted. I mean, it's so ridiculous, right? A suggestion like that. So, you know, they're just trying so hard, and it's not working. They've even now started imitating me, of all people. They want to imitate me. And they start using foul language, but they use too much of it. You know, you can't use the F word 7 times in one sentence. It doesn't work. It might work once every 7 news conferences, but you can't do it. You can't do it 7 times in one sentence. So I don't know. They're really they're in big trouble. That party. Go ahead.
Mr. President. Some alleged smugglers have survived some of these recent strikes and been sent back to their home country. If they're terrorists, why not just arrest and detain them?
Go ahead.
2 points on that. First, when I served in Iraq in 2005 and 2006, we used to, in sort of a gallows humor way, talk about the Iraqi catch and release program, the reality that we would catch a lot of people, hand them over, and then they would be recycled back through, and we'd have to recapture them or attack them again. And that's why changing the dynamic and actually taking kinetic strikes on these boats ought change the psychology of these foreign terrorist organizations. To those 2 that survived the shot on the semi-submersible, think again, compared to Iraq and Afghanistan, the vast majority of people that we captured on the battlefield, we handed over to the home country. Did we always like how it shaped out? Sometimes we did, sometimes we did not. But 99% would go to the Afghan authorities or the Iraqi authorities. So in this case, those 2, they were treated by American medics and handed immediately over to their countries where they came from, hopefully to face prosecution, which is a very standard way of handling something like this.
And you'll do that with future survivors, anyone else who's survived?
We've got protocol of how we'll handle it.
Not that guy. He's so hopeless. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yesterday, there was a vote at the Knesset on annexing the West Bank. Do you see it as a challenge to your peace efforts?
Could you say that louder, please?
Yes, yesterday there was a vote at the Knesset in Israel on annexing the West Bank. Do you see it as a challenge to your peace efforts?
Will you answer that, please? Because I cannot understand the words you're saying. Where are you from? Where are you from? You're from France. Beautiful accent, but we can't understand what you're saying.
She said a vote at the Knesset on the West Bank.
The West Bank is, don't worry about the West Bank. Israel's not going to do anything with the West Bank, okay? Don't worry about it. Is that your question? They're not going to do anything with the West Bank. Don't worry about it. Israel's doing very well. They're not going to do anything with it. Yeah, please, go ahead.
Thank you, President Trump. Are there any safeguards in place to protect Americans from fentanyl and cartels when you leave office in 2028? Any protocols that could be put in place in case a future administration comes in that wants open borders? And I also have a question for the Secretary of War as well after your answer.
Well, the biggest thing we can do is make sure they don't come in, because open borders, they would destroy. It's amazing that our country is even surviving with what we went through, coming in by the millions and coming in from the wrong places. You know, I know all these people that run these countries, and they're smart. They're very street smart, and they're not sending their best, you know. They're not sending, they're taking them out of their prisons and their mental institutions, as I say over and over again. They're the drug dealers. They're the drug addicts. They're people that don't work. I mean, the best of them are people that don't work. They don't work. They're on welfare, their form of welfare, which is tiny. You know what their form of welfare? They give you a piece of paper. But they want people that work. They don't let those people come out because they want those people. You know, they cherish those people. Those are the people that make their country run. They give us all of the people that don't work and are murderers. 11,843 murderers came in. 11,800, many of them committed, more than 50% committed more than one murder. Now, why do we want them? Why would Biden and that group of thugs that he had working for him, why would they accept these people? Why would he accept? Nobody understands it. You know, they say maybe they wanted the vote, but I did great with the Hispanic vote, but these are people from all over the world. Why would they do it? So one question, no matter what I do, I can't, you always like to know the opponent. You have an opponent. What are they getting at? And usually you can. Why would they allow 20 million, maybe 25 million people into this country, almost all of which, but most of which should not have been allowed into our country? It's one of the great enigmas. What they've done to this country should never be forgotten. In history, should never, ever be forgotten. And now it looks like we're going to have a communist mayor in New York. That'll be a lot of fun. But remember this, they have to go through the White House. Yeah, please, go ahead.
Founder of Binance. Can you explain why you chose to pardon him, and did it have anything to do with his involvement in your
Which one?
family's?
Who is that?
The founder of Binance. He has an involvement in your own
The
family's
recent
crypto
one, yes.
business.
I believe we're talking about the same person because I do pardon a lot of people. I don't know. He was recommended by a lot of people. A lot of people say that. Are you talking about the crypto person? A lot of people say that he wasn't guilty of anything. He served 4 months in jail, and they say that he was not guilty of anything, that what he did, well, you don't know much about crypto. You know nothing about nothing, you fake news. But let me just tell you that he was somebody that, as I was told, I don't know him. I don't believe I've ever met him. But I've been told by a lot of support. He had a lot of support. And they said that what he did is not even a crime. It wasn't a crime, that he was persecuted by the Biden administration. And so I gave him a pardon at the request of a lot of very good people.
Mr. President.
Yeah, please. Yes, Daniel.
President, thank you so much.
This is the kind of question I like.
Yeah,
right here.
the numbers from this task force are jaw-dropping. I wanted to know, this is a question for you and both Stephen, since it was said this is your brainchild. What are the lessons to be learned from the success of the task force, and what are your continued goals with this task force now that you have about 3 years left?
Well, the best thing we have going is we have such talent around this tab. I could go over every one of these men and women, and we have unbelievable talent. They've got the naturals, you know, like somebody that hits a baseball or a golf ball or, that you see more, it's more evident. It's beautiful because it's sports. You can tell somebody right away, are they good or are they not? These people are the most talented people at what they do. And when we started talking about this, Stephen and all of us, it seems so easy. What is surprising to me is how quickly we can straighten out a large city, a big city, a mean city, a city that's sick, that got very sick with guns all over the place, with bullets shooting all over, where you take your life in your hands if you go out and buy a loaf of bread. That's not America. That's not our country. And those people don't care how you do it. They just want it done. They really do. You know, when you go to the people in the street, they don't know. Is it National Guard? They just want it done. They want to be safe. And we've gained a great following of Americans, real Americans, people that want to be safe. But I think the biggest thing we say is we have tremendous talent. We were able to recognize, like a football team, like a baseball team, we were able to recognize the talent. And the talent is largely in this room for the whole country. It's largely in this room. There's really nothing like it. And that's why I think we had D.C. done, not perfectly, but pretty much done, at least normalized in 12 days. Would you say 12 days? On the 12th day, it felt different. And we took a lot of bad people out, never to come back again. Then most of them never to come back again. But there's great talent, and there's also great courage. I've been watching what goes on. And then you have the radical left lunatics, and what's that all about? I mean, they're fighting us because we want to stop crime. Where do these people come from? They're paid money. I guess they're paid a lot of money. But like I saw that ridiculous march the other day, I say, these people are not representative of our country. And not all of them, of course, but many of them are total lowlifes. These are lowlifes. These are people that are paid agitators, and they're not representative of our country. So I don't know. I can just tell you that our country has tremendous spirit right now. You know that better than anybody because you cover it well. But we have a lot of people that are very happy right now with the direction. They did a poll the other day. The direction of our country is better than it's been in 37 years. And I'm upset because I think it should be better than that. I actually said we should be better than that. So, thank you very much for your question. Brian?
Mr. President, yes. Thank you, Mr. President. You guys have done an amazing job in Memphis. Some of those numbers are staggering. And we've gotten message on social media wanting to thank you for that. But I think, can you talk about the number of missing children you guys have discovered in Memphis? That's amazing.
Well, it's hundreds of thousands were lost through Biden and the Biden administration, and we are getting a lot of them back, but they're either dead, they're slaves, they're captured in some form. But think of it, hundreds of thousands we're talking about, not even believable. And they came in through the border, they were sold, they were bargained for, and this was all Biden, meaning Biden and Obama, the same mentality, frankly. I think it's the same mentality. Let me tell you, Barack Hussein Obama was a lousy president. A lot of bad things happened. Remember when they used to talk about Trump with the jail cells? Well, he built the jail cells for the children. He built those jail cells. Remember that came out? But, sir, they were built in 2014. You remember when that came out? After me going through that stuff for about 2 weeks, and then they found out it was Barack Obama that built those jail cells. No, these people they were bad leaders. I hope we don't have it again. I hope we don't have it again because, our country's come back a long way, but it can only withstand so much, and we don't want to ever go through that again. We never want to have open borders again. We don't want to have men playing in women's sports. We don't want to have transgender for everybody. We don't want that. We want to have a great country with low interest rates, nice housing, great education, a strong military, the basics. Yes, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. In last night's New York City mayoral debate, Zohran Mamdani said he would close Rikers Island if elected. What kind of impact would that have on public safety?
Well, it's not good. I guess it's not a very nice place, but you need it. You need something. You have a lot of additional people in New York City that should not have been here. They came here through the open border, through Biden's. I don't know how they even do it. New York City's always been tight for money. And then they spend, $8 billion, and nobody complains about it, on people that just showed up and they just came out of nowhere. Where did they get the money? All of a sudden they have money. I tell you what, we have to keep our prisons very fair and very safe, but you get a lot of criminals. We have a lot of additional criminals. I used to talk about it. They used to say, well, only good people come in from foreign countries. I said, that's not right. I didn't know that for a fact, but it had just started, right? The open borders and people flowing in by the millions. They make our criminals look like the nicest people on earth. That's the only good thing. They make our criminals look like nice people. They are the meanest, the most vicious. Tren de Aragua, you don't get any sicker. They cut people's fingers off because they called the cop. Did you call the cop? Yes. They cut off his finger so he can't call the cop anymore. And then they say, next time we're going to cut off your hand if you cut, because they took over his apartment in Colorado. Colorado, they took over a town, then they took over another town, and you have a weak governor over there. He doesn't know what the hell he's doing, so he lets it go on. But we're getting them out of here. We're getting them all out. They're going back to lots of, not just Venezuela, they're going back to lots of countries. Venezuela would be one, however. Yeah, please.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Yeah.
A moment ago, you said that if Secretary Hegseth went to Congress and briefed them on the operations against
will go, I said.
You will go. And it would be difficult for them to
go.
object.
I don't see any loss in going. No reason not to. They'll always complain, we should have gone. So we're going to definitely, I'd like to just tell you, let's go. We'll go.
And Mr.
We're going to
President,
tell them what we're going to do, and I think they're going to probably like it, except for the radical left lunatics.
And Mr. President, if you are declaring war against these cartels and Congress is likely to approve of that process, why not just ask for a declaration of war?
Well, I don't think we're going to necessarily ask for a declaration of war. I think we're just going to kill people that are bringing drugs into our country. Okay? We're going to kill them. They're going to be like dead. Okay? Yeah. Yes, red hair.
Thank you.
Beautiful red hair.
Thank you. I'll tell my hairdresser that. She'll love it. This is a question for both you and the Secretary of War, Mr. Hegseth.
Who are you with?
I'm with the Center Square. We're a newswire service. With everything that's going on between the narco terrorists in the Caribbean, and then also with more Chinese, Iranian, Russian ships also taking part in Venezuela. Are you have any plans of expanding operations out of Roosevelt Roads and in fact, placing some home porting some ships there?
Yeah, go ahead, Pete.
We're familiar with the location that you're referring to, and we'll make sure that we're properly displaced in order to deal with the contingency we're dealing with there, and also any ways in which other countries would attempt to be involved also. So we can walk and chew gum. We're definitely keeping our eyes on near-peer adversaries at the same time, but we think sending a message on these cartels, these narco-terrorists, is an important inside our hemisphere, which for far too long, other presidents, as the president pointed out, they've ignored our own backyard and allowed other countries to increase their influence here, which only threatens the American people. We're changing that.
One big thing that has happened, though, because you mentioned expansion and expand our efforts. So when I was running for office, second term, everybody was talking about the fact that nobody wanted to join the military, nobody wanted to join the great police force. They didn't want to join New York's finest or any of our police forces. They didn't want to join anything having to do almost like with the country, with the uniform. We are setting records with the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, Space Force, Coast Guard. We're setting records. We've never had anything like it. And I'll tell you when it started, November 5th. We didn't even have to wait till January 20th. They saw spirit. And now we have people coming in that it's unbelievable. And if we wanted to increase our military force, if we wanted to increase any one of these, including police forces, they can now get men. People didn't want to be policemen and women. They didn't want to be firemen and women. They didn't want to go into the military. We were having tremendous recruiting problems, and now we're setting records. We literally, last year at this time, you were doing stories that the recruitment was a disaster. We couldn't get men and women to go into the military. Now we have such an overabundance. We've never had, it's, as I understand it, it's like record-setting recruitment. This is in less than a year. It's been amazing. So this is a good time to expand if we want to do it. And I think we should. I think we should. And we probably will. Yeah, please. Yeah. Blue.
A couple questions for you. First for you and Secretary Hegseth. Is the administration supportive of sending National Guardsmen to cities for the express purpose of aiding deportation and immigration enforcement efforts?
To expand deportation efforts?
Sending National Guardsmen to U.S. cities for the express purpose of aiding deportation and immigration enforcement
What we've done so far is stand alongside federal law enforcement in every way, facilities and personnel, but also we have a great deal of lift inside the military. We're able to move assets in a way that no other aspect of the U.S. government can. And so where we can rapidly assist with mass deportations, we have been happy to do that.
And then one more question, if I may. Is the administration at all supportive of potential measures to crack down or regulate or even ban apps that track ICE agents' locations?
What do you mean by that?
Like specific apps that are used to track the location of ICE agents?
I guess we'll do that. I'm not a big app guy. I'm not into that too much. I think Pam might be it. Let's go.
Yes.
Give me a good answer there.
Yes. These organizations, President Trump, are coming in and their apps to track law enforcement officers, and it jeopardizes their lives, where they're going to be, their location. And we've actually been working really well with the tech companies who have been cooperating because they don't want our law enforcement officers to get injured. So, yes.
Well, I mean, I see it with ICE, where they're having, where they define where they live, who they are. And, I didn't have a big view on the mask, but I now understand why they should wear masks. I think it's very dangerous for them not to wear masks. They can do whatever they want. I notice some do it and some don't, but it's pretty dangerous. But when you look at, you talk about that question, I think it's very dangerous, and I think you're coming down on that very hard, right? Yeah, please.
No, sir. Mr. President.
Go ahead.
Thank you, sir. When you were running for re-election in 2024, you released a video statement where you made this exact promise to show no mercy on the cartels and employ every military asset necessary to combat them. In that same video, you also said that you plan to expose all the bribes and corruptions with politicians and the cartels.
We're doing that.
Has your
we're
task
trying to
force
do
been
that.
looking into that in American politicians?
Yeah, where the money's coming from. Because you see it. like even that garbage deal they had this weekend, which was embarrassing to them, and the crowds were much more, the crowds were not big. Those crowds were not big at all. But when you look at signs, and they're all made beautifully, the yellow signs, I saw the yellows, the blues, but they're all made professionally in a printing shop, looks like on Madison Avenue someplace. Some guy is paying for all that stuff. And we don't mind protest. Protest is a good thing. I protest. I'm always protesting, right? But when you see some of these people are going crazy. They're going crazy because they're getting paid. Because there's no reason for them to be going crazy. But you watch some of them, and they're professional agitators, and we are finding out who's paying them. Yeah, we have a lot of information about who they are. You're going to be very surprised when you find out.
And I have a question for Secretary Hegseth. Sir, a memo circulating on social media details the establishment of a National Guard response force that's going to be trained in crowd control and civil unrest and deployed in all 50 states by April of 2026. Can you verify the authenticity of that memo, and do you have any more information on the operations?
I'm not going to answer particulars on something that may be in the planning process, but we definitely do have multiple layers of National Guard response forces, whether it's...
You have been listening to President Trump along with the Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, and Attorney General Pam Bondi answering reporters' questions. Couple of highlights just to point out: President Trump defending his administration's strikes against ships that he has described as drug-carrying boats in the Caribbean, saying notably that, yes, the administration does plan to brief Congress on these actions, saying you'll be seeing that soon. When asked if these people are smuggling fentanyl through Venezuela, President Trump saying, yes, they are. That is not necessarily the case. We're going to do some fact-checking on that momentarily. Other notable things he said: he was asked about the Knesset vote on the West Bank, was pressed on the vote to move forward there. He said, don't worry about the West Bank. Israel is doing fine. So covering a range of different topics, including asked about his pardon of the Binance founder who pleaded guilty to money laundering back in 2023. President Trump saying that he pardons a lot of people. He doesn't know a whole lot about it, but he was told by a number of people that what he did wasn't a crime. So notable justification there. Also taking aim at the Democratic frontrunner in New York's mayoral race, Zohran Mamdani, who is a self-described democratic socialist. President Trump calling him a communist and lashing out at him, as well as broadly at the Democratic Party for a range of reasons, and taking aim at those No Kings protests over the weekend, mocking the participants there, calling them losers. So just a few of the headlines that we heard from President Trump in answering a wide range of questions. I do want to go to our team of reporters who's been watching this and listening along with me: NBC News White House correspondent Yamiche Alcindor, NBC News senior Homeland Security correspondent Julia Ainsley, and NBC News senior national security correspondent Courtney Kube. Thanks to all of you for being here. Julia, I want to start with you. Can we talk about the president's claim that fentanyl is being smuggled through Venezuela? The facts suggest otherwise. What are the actual details on that?
That's right. According to Customs and Border Protection stats, as well as DEA, that is still live. These websites have not been removed. These are the stats this administration is putting out. Over 90% of the fentanyl that comes into the United States is manufactured in Mexico with precursor chemicals that come from China, and it is usually driven in cars, often driven by U.S. citizens, through legal ports of entry along the U.S.-Mexico border. I've been down there. I've seen the technology they use to try to scan fentanyl there. That's usually seen as the front line against fentanyl. There's no evidence that Venezuela is a country that is manufacturing fentanyl on a scale that's posing a real threat to the United States. I've also gone back to some experts today who say they've never seen evidence of that. One thing that Secretary Noem said that is true, although, shocking, I don't think a lot of people realize this, and it's a big win for this administration, is that fentanyl stops and encounters at the southern border, the amount of fentanyl they've seized has actually dropped by 50% from 2024 to 2025. But rather than focusing on that win and exactly what happened on the border, and we should say those drops did begin under the previous administration, instead there's a focus that this is a new emerging threat from Venezuela from these boats that needs to be addressed.
Hit the pause button. He's just asked about some of our reporting, actually, that Senator Adam Schiff right now, prosecutors do not believe they have enough evidence to move forward with an indictment.
Politics. He's a horrible human being, very dishonest person. I have no idea what's going on. You tell me that he's going to be indicted. I don't know. You could ask Pam. I don't know if she could say it. Probably you are allowed to say it, but I wouldn't know about that. I can only tell you he's a very bad, I think he's actually a sick person. Do you want to talk about that?
We're not going to comment on any grand jury that's open. We can't legally.
I don't know. By the way, I hope it's true, but I don't know anything about it. Yeah, please. Oh, millions of dollars, yeah. Well, I also give, I give a lot of money to the White House. The White House is, as you know, I give my salary, and I usually like to steer it to the White House because this house was a little bit abandoned. First of all, for 4 years, you had a guy walking around that didn't know where the hell he was. And this house was not taken care of the way it was supposed to be. I take very good care of property. I was very good at that. And you'll notice the floors downstairs. I paid for them. Marble, the most beautiful marble you've ever seen. The white floors down in the palm room, which they look like they came out of, I don't want to lose because they're big supporters of mine, Home Depot, so I'm not going to say bad, but they did come out of a box from Home Depot about 30 years ago. They were all broken, but now they have the most beautiful floors, the most beautiful lights and chandeliers. I think most of you, Brian, you've seen that, right?
Yes.
How beautiful is that? And I take care of it. So I spend millions of dollars on this building, taking care of it. It was not properly maintained. And now it's starting to gleam like it should. It should really gleam. And you should go down and visit the Presidential Walk of Fame. Have you seen it? It's quite good. I'm sure that a lot of people coming to the White House.
Okay, so you just heard President Trump there commenting on Senator Adam Schiff. Of course, there are a number of questions about whether Schiff would be criminally indicted. He was being investigated for allegations of mortgage fraud charges, which he has consistently denied. And it comes on the heels of a report that we just put out, federal mortgage fraud investigation against Democratic Senator Adam Schiff has stalled. That's according to 4 people familiar with the investigation. Prosecutors at this point in time do not believe they have enough evidence to move forward with an indictment. President Trump was asked if Schiff were to be indicted, that should he step down. President Trump calling Senator Schiff, quote unquote, scum. Turning to Attorney General Pam Bondi for comment. The Attorney General saying that she does not comment on open and ongoing investigations. President Trump then taking that moment to say that he hopes it is true. I do want to go to Ryan Reilly on this new reporting because he does have some of this new information, including a statement from Preet Bharara, who is representing Senator Adam Schiff. Ryan, bring us up to speed. What can you tell us?
Yeah, so there is an intense meeting between Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche and the U.S. Attorney for Maryland over this case, Tristan, as we just posted our story on NBCNews.com. This case has been going on for a while, and obviously, if you don't have the evidence, and from what legal experts have said, this would be a very tough case to bring. But they don't. There's not a formal closure to the investigation yet, because based on what happened in Virginia in the Letitia James case, that's sort of the thing that's overhanging all of this. Because in that instance, you had the U.S. attorney actually kicked out and replaced with one of Donald Trump's own attorneys, previous attorneys, who then prosecuted these cases, and she had never handled any prosecution before, had no prosecutorial experience. The first time that she stood in the courtroom, she actually went to the wrong table when they were returning these indictments against James Comey, as well as Attorney General James. So it's that's what's sort of hanging over all of this notion that Donald Trump could potentially go after the U.S. Attorney in Maryland. But the U.S. Attorney in Maryland did bring forward this other case against one of Donald Trump's other enemies, of course, but that case was considered to be a much stronger case. Experts agree over these other two cases out of Virginia, which are going to face a lot of hurdles. In fact, one legal expert told me that in terms of the vindictive prosecution motion that James Comey has made, if that doesn't succeed, then no vindictive prosecution argument will ever succeed, just because the president's comments put such a weight and really complicate that case, Kristen.
Well, and let me read you a bit of what Preet Bharara, who represents Senator Schiff, said in a statement. He says, quote, "It seems pretty clear that a team of career prosecutors have thoroughly reviewed the politically motivated allegations against Senator Schiff and found they are unsupported by any evidence and are baseless. The transparently vindictive effort to pursue the senator has no merit, and if there is any justice left in the Justice Department, this should be the end of the matter," Bharara added. But it's important to note, Ryan, it's not necessarily the end of the matter, right? These sources saying that this investigation is not closed.
That's right. Yeah. I think that the issue here is that whoever says, no, we're not moving forward with this investigation and makes the declination, that's a serious matter, and obviously Donald Trump isn't going to be too happy with that news. And just given that history, that's what's hanging over all of this. So, this idea that, we'll continue to investigate is something that you could argue is kind of something kicking the can down the road, and no one wants to be the person to say there's just no case here. Also, you're just going to struggle probably in Maryland, because remember, they struggled even to get past a majority on the grand jury, which is a much lower bar in the James Comey case. So when you're talking about a grand jury in Maryland, considering all of the grand juries in D.C. that have essentially nullified a lot of the prosecutions that have been brought forward that they found to be sort of overtly political and sort of sent a message about, that's a big possibility here. I think that if they were sitting in Maryland and they could come back and say, we think that this case is obviously political, and just choose not to indict, even if they didn't necessarily, even if they thought that the evidence was somewhere. But they're not supposed to bring forward a case unless they think they can convict. That is what the Justice Manual says. So the notion that, you actually think you could secure an indictment on the back end, or rather you could secure a conviction by a unanimous jury from Maryland on the back end of this, is, I think, kind of pie in the sky thinking there. And so that's kind of, I think, the big bar that's sort of looming over all of this.
Yeah. Yamiche, let me turn to you at the White House, as Ryan Reilly has that breaking news for us. Yamiche, we just heard President Trump's really strong language directed at Senator Schiff, one of his political rivals, and we should note that he is one of three names that appears on what was a Truth Social post that a source told me was intended to be a private message sent to Attorney General Pam Bondi, essentially calling for the indictment of James Comey, calling for the indictment of Letitia James, and calling for the indictment of Senator Schiff. Two of the three people on that list have been indicted. So put all of this into the political context, Yamiche. This is a president who campaigned on a promise of retribution. He later said that his success would be his retribution. But what we are seeing from the Justice Department has raised questions about whether there is some acting at the direction of President Trump. Yamiche.
That's right, Kristen. And I was looking down at my phone because, one, the president's still talking, but two, I wanted to look at exactly what he said about Adam Schiff. And he said he's a very dishonest person, a sick person, a very bad person. Now, in this instance, he's talking about Senator Schiff, but you could take that language and add it to almost any one of the political foes that he's been pressuring very publicly the Department of Justice to go after, whether that's Letitia James, whether that's other people. You think of John Bolton, you think of Christopher Wray, a former FBI director after, who has not been indicted yet, but who soon after he indicted James Comey, he was also going after. So the president has a long list of people that he really wants to exert revenge over, and he's not making that at all sort of a hard thing to understand. In fact, he's making it very public. And even with that message where that was intended, based on your reporting and our reporting, that it was supposed to be a direct message to Pam Bondi, all you have to do is really listen to President Trump, and he goes off on so many different people. And he definitely feels like the Department of Justice is a sort of arm of his that he can use and wield against his political opponents. So I think it's very interesting to hear Pam Bondi say they don't want to talk about grand jury while you have and grand jury deliberations and what could be going on while you have the president so openly going after these different people. And we also have a story I think that came out just recently on NBCNews.com that showed that there are a lot of people who are very worried that they could face indictments. You think of people like Miles Taylor. He was the person that was going by that sort of anonymous name and wrote a book about President Trump and went after him. There are other people like Olivia Troy, who was also working in the first administration with President Trump and who has been a very public critic of the president. So there are just a number of people who are either already indicted or who are very, very worried that they may be indicted, Kristen.
All right, Yamiche and Ryan Reilly, thank you so much for jumping in on that breaking news. And we just heard President Trump talking about Adam Schiff, though not the breaking news specifically. I do want to come back to the table here. Courtney, let me turn to you because all of this is kind of going on against this broader question about executive authority. What is the president entitled to do? What is he not entitled to do? And that brings us, I think, to where we started this conversation, which is these attacks against these boats in the Caribbean. The president says we know everything about these boats. These are drug smuggling boats. He also said, yes, we plan to brief Congress. What do you make of that? Where do you see this whole discussion going? And the fact that Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, weighed in on all of this.
Yeah, what was clear to me was the questions, the continued questions of President Trump about Congress. And members of Congress questioning some of the information that they've gotten or the lack thereof. Today, it seemed to be, look, fine. If people think they aren't getting enough information, we'll brief Congress. It seemed as if he was pushed into it today by the questions. On the executive authority, what's very clear is they continue to expand the aperture of these strikes. It was boats that were from Venezuela that were carrying drugs. They named the cartels in some cases. Now, yesterday and the day before, we've seen 2 strikes now in the Eastern Pacific. So that's not Venezuela. That is Colombia. It's Ecuador, potentially other places. And the president is now very openly speaking not only about the potential for strikes inside Venezuela, but he also said recently that he has authorized covert CIA action in there. So it makes sense that the Hill needs to have some information. The real question is, will members of Congress say that they need to not just have notification, but authorization here? And that's what still remains unclear. And frankly, it depends on which party you're talking to when you ask about that. One thing I was also really struck by in the president's comments just there was when he was asked about the identities of the people on these boats. And he said, well, we generally know who they are.
Yes.
Well, we have been asking. We have no information about who they are, with the exception of the U.S. knows who the survivors were. But I would point out, generally knowing who they are and then taking strikes against them. I mean, that is an astonishing acknowledgement that they can't even say with certainty who these people are. And when it comes to the adjudication or prosecution of these people, Ecuador already released the individual that the U.S. provided to the U.S. sent to their custody. So, I mean, it really fights this argument that they are the Al-Qaeda of the hemisphere.
And one other thing they said, they tried to make it seem, like it was a common sense move because these are not fishing boats because they have white powder in silver boxes. Right. But it gets back again to the fact that we don't have evidence of fentanyl coming from Venezuela. And when fentanyl is transported, it's in small quantities. So really unclear exactly who they're targeting here and why.
All this context is so important. And Julia, the other kind of question at the center of the president's executive authority is that he continues to send ICE agents, the National Guard, into different cities all across the country. Where does that stand? And there's obviously a huge legal battle about whether he has the authority to do that. And you heard the president doubling down on the fact that he thinks that he's making cities safer.
It feels like a moving target every day, depending on the state, the court, or just the moves, even though a court like the one in California has said that he cannot federalize National Guard there. But just yesterday, Trump was ready to send 100 members of the National Guard into San Francisco. And then it appears he's had this about face although it's not permanent. The mayor of San Francisco said they had a conversation. Trump has said from that conversation, he'll wait for now. He's not going to deploy them on Saturday as he thought he might. He says the mayor's trying to get crime under control. He'll let them have a shot, which is a really different way that we've ever talked about the use of the National Guard or law enforcement in this country, which has never been centralized at a federal level. It's never been, let's see if the mayor can do it on his own.
Court, with our final minute that's left here, I thought it was notable that you had Secretary Hegseth sitting next to President Trump answering questions, because quite frankly, there's been a crackdown on media coverage at the Pentagon, as well as an outreach to members of Congress with information, with the secretary really trying to control the flow of information. What did you make of the fact that here we saw him sitting next to the president and answering some questions?
Yeah, I mean, the secretary is just obsessed with leaks, and he has been from the beginning, and it's not just against the media. And for the record, also, the definition in his mind of a leak is anything that's not an authorized press release or said by him directly. So it is, frankly, it's the first time we've heard him take questions in some time. It's interesting to hear his perspective. We don't hear it very often. I was also struck by how his language on the boat strikes has really tightened and strengthened based on what he just said there.
Well, we can't thank the two of you enough. Courtney and Julia, thank you for your expertise and your patience in waiting with me. I really appreciate it. We turn now to the still unending shutdown. We're now at day 23 after a dozen failed votes in the Senate to fund the government, and with the financial toll mounting for federal employees who are not being paid, some of whom are still working despite not getting a paycheck. A Republican bill to pay those essential workers, which President Trump just moments ago called a test for Democrats, failed this afternoon in the Senate. Democrats today tried to pass their own bill, which would pay both furloughed and non-furloughed federal workers, which also failed. Joining me now is Nevada Democratic Senator Catherine Cortez Masto. Senator Cortez Masto, thanks so much for being here. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Always happy to join you.
Always wonderful to have you. Let's talk about the action on the Hill today. Just for some background for our viewers, you've consistently voted with Republicans on this funding bill that would effectively reopen the government attached. But today you voted against a bill that would pay essential federal workers. Why? What was your thinking behind that, Senator?
Because it wasn't a guarantee. So here's the challenge. There's too much politics being played, and federal workers are the pawns. The government should be open. I've consistently said that. We should be paying our federal workers, our contractors. We shouldn't be furloughing them. What happened today on the floor by Senator Johnson was just a gimmick. It was a gimmick to try to challenge the Democrats, and quite honestly, it wasn't going to guarantee that any of the federal workers would get paid. But what was on the floor also prior to that, most people didn't even talk about, was Gary Peters brought unanimous consent, a bill that mandated that federal workers get paid, that furlough workers get paid, that independent contractors that work at the federal level get paid. And if you were watching what happened on the floor, Senator Johnson refused to accept that as an amendment or join Gary Peters in that legislation. So again, it was a gimmick, and I think the federal workers deserve better. We got to open the government. We've got to pay them. We've got to, so many federal workers, and I know in my state, my independent workers that are getting furloughed and my federal workers, they're paycheck to paycheck. I hear from them all the time. This is crazy to me that we are not doing our job, appropriating. We need to engage in good government and ensure that we stop utilizing the federal workers as political pawns. And it's been my frustration since I've been here in the Senate.
And, Senator, we are now in the fourth week of this shutdown, which is hard to believe. If you look at the polling, people are blaming both parties pretty equally at this point. You have, again, voted with Republicans, arguing, let's reopen the government now, and then let's negotiate an extension of health care subsidies, which is what this fight is about. How do you convince your Democratic colleagues that there needs to be a change in strategy if that's, in fact, what you believe, given that it doesn't seem like either side is budging?
Well, let me just say this. And again, this is why I go back to this is a failure in governing, and it requires leadership in both sides, including the president, to come to the table to work through these issues, to open the government, to address what is happening across the country, which is this looming healthcare crisis. It is. I see it in my state. Millions of Americans are going to lose health care or not be able to afford the increase in premiums to the Affordable Care Act. And that is going to have a devastating and ripple effect on the healthcare industry across the country. And it's going to cause premiums for other people to go up. So it needs to be addressed. And there's political posturing right now. You know, what is crazy to me is people are holding out, coming to the table to negotiate, to do our jobs, because they want to see who can flinch first based on how much pain the American public undertakes. That's crazy to me. That's not good government. And so it really, for me, is talking to some of my colleagues, talking both Democrats and Republicans who care about this issue, who know we can do both. We can get the government back open again, and we can address this looming healthcare crisis in the room and start to talk. We've been having those conversations, some of us, and I am committed to making sure those conversations continue, because this stalemate is just harming Americans across the country.
So let me ask you about those conversations, because I think a lot of people are curious. Are there any actual negotiations going on behind the scenes that you are a part of or aware of to actually reopen the government? Are those conversations happening at this point, Senator, or are basically both sides talking past each other? Okay.
No, yes. There's an opportunity for a negotiation to take place and a deal to be had here. There can be common ground.
And do those conversations include leadership, Senator?
Leadership is aware that they are taking place.
But leadership's not a part of it?
Leadership is aware that these are taking place. And it is typical what happens, unfortunately, in Congress right now, that there's going to be some of us, quite honestly, moderates in the middle that recognize we can do both. We can govern, we can keep the government open, and we can appropriate, and we can address this looming healthcare crisis. But let me just say this. Part of the challenge we have here is not just in leadership. We have a House that has not been in session for a month. You just talked about a bill that Senator Johnson brought on the floor today, the vote to pay federal workers. Had we even passed that, nothing would have happened, because the House isn't even in session. The Speaker of the House thinks that keeping them out of session, and by the way, they're getting paid, but they're not doing their work. Keeping them out of session puts more leverage on Democrats in the Senate. I mean, this is crazy. This is not how government should be working on behalf of the American public. And this is why there's a frustration of Americans across the country, including in my state.
Senator, given that something needs to change in order to break through this logjam, I wonder if you've had any thought about changing your vote to a no vote on the Republican bill to reopen the government, to make the point to them, you're not going to get enough Democratic votes unless you come to the table and negotiate. Would you take that step?
Well, I can tell you already how many votes we've had to try to open the government, and the Democrats have not moved. We need more Democrats and more Republicans to come to the table together to say, this is what we demand. We want to open the government, and we want to fix the healthcare crisis. That's the only way you're going to get leadership to change. But I will say this, the frustration, I think, from my colleagues has been, even with the Republican leadership, you can't rely on them to be in these negotiations, because there's one person that is quite honestly missing from this, which is Donald Trump. Leadership in both the House and the Senate, Republican leadership, will not do anything unless Donald Trump tells them to do it. So there has to be someone from the White House with the authority, with Donald Trump's authority, to make this happen. And that's really how this should work, right? The President of the United States should be constructive here, helping us, two sides come to the table, negotiate, bring people to the table to address what Americans are dealing with right now. Let's solve the problems. Let's fix the healthcare crisis. Let's open the government. Let's engage in good governing. And that's what many of us are still hoping for. That's why we still engage in these conversations.
Yeah, before I let you go, I do want to ask you about this bill that you and some of your Democratic colleagues have proposed. This is on drug prices. It would effectively repeal parts of the so-called Big Beautiful Bill that made some medications for rare diseases, including cancer drugs, Senator, ineligible for Medicare price negotiations. Do you have any Republican support for this bill or confidence that it will, in fact, pass?
Well, let me just say not yet, but this is a perfect example of where there should be and can be bipartisan support. We are talking about reducing the costs for Americans when it comes to cancer medications, and allowing Medicare to negotiate with Big Pharma for those cancer medication drugs. We actually allowed that in the Inflation Reduction Act. And when Trump came into office, they stopped that negotiation, and they took those cancer drugs out of that requirement that these drugs should be negotiated for a lower price for Medicare. The legislation that I have with my colleagues is let's put it back in. There's millions of Americans that have rare diseases, cancer related, and they rely on these drugs and cannot afford the drugs. And Big Pharma right now is making $8.8 billion just because we are now not allowing this negotiation to take place to lower these costs for Americans. So this is a perfect example of just common sense solving problems for Americans, including lowering costs, healthcare costs for them. This is part of what I am hearing back home. People are struggling, not just the high cost of groceries and clothing and energy and housing. It is healthcare. It's a perfect example where we can come together in a bipartisan way.
All right. Senator Cortez Masto, as always, thank you for your time and your perspective today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And we are back tomorrow with more Meet the Press Now. There's more ahead on NBC News Now.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.